Hello and welcome back. I hope the revision cycle has been treating you fairly this week, because I know exactly how it feels to sit for hours, with a thinker's name on one side of the page and a current event on the other, unsure how to make them shake hands. That is exactly the skill we sharpen here, every single day. This is the Sociology Desk, issue 053, and today we are working with two stories: a caste census that puts a number on inequality, and a Supreme Court ruling that quietly rewrites what a family is allowed to mean. Let us get straight into it. Our first story sits inside Paper 1, under stratification and mobility, specifically the theories of social stratification: structural functionalist, Marxist, and Weberian. Telangana recently completed a census-scale caste survey covering more than 97% of the state's population, and it built something called a Composite Backwardness Index, a single score built from over 40 indicators covering education, occupation, housing, and social integration. What it found should worry anyone who still believes that economic growth quietly dissolves caste on its own. Now, here is the concept you must anchor this story on, and you must anchor it precisely. Max Weber drew a very sharp line between class and status group. Class, for Weber, is your market situation, your life chances based on property, skill, and income. Status is completely different. A status group is a community bound together by shared social honor, by a style of life, and by restrictions on marriage and association. And crucially, status is inherited at birth, not earned in the market. Why does this matter for Telangana? Because the survey found that caste disadvantage survives even after you statistically control for income. In plain words, a poor upper caste household and a poor Dalit household are not equally disadvantaged. The caste gap persists on top of the income gap. That is Weberian status closure, operating independently of class, showing up in real government data. Now let me give you a second move, one that will genuinely separate you from other candidates. The sociologist Dipankar Gupta pushed back against Louis Dumont's famous idea that caste is one continuous ladder of purity and pollution. Gupta said no. Caste behaves as discrete, bounded categories, each community defending its own separate standard of worth, not everyone ranked on a single scale. Here is why the Telangana data matters again. When researchers broke down the inequality in that Composite Backwardness Index, they found that the overwhelming share of the gap sits between the four broad groups: scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, backward class, and open category, rather than within them. That is not a smooth gradient. That is a series of hard boundaries. If you can cite this finding as evidence for Gupta's argument against Dumont, you are writing at a level most candidates never reach. Let us lock in the quotable formulation for Weber, because in the exam hall, precision of attribution buys you marks that vague paraphrasing never will. You can write this. As Max Weber argued in Economy and Society, class position is determined by market situation, while status position rests on a community's shared social honor. And the two principles of stratification need not move together. Notice the phrase, need not move together. That is your entire argument in one line. Class and status can diverge, and Telangana just proved it. Now let me put on the examiner's hat for a moment, because this is the single most important slide in today's brief. Picture two answers to a 20-mark question on caste and stratification. The average answer, the one that scores around 14 out of 20, spends most of its words describing the Telangana survey, the numbers, the percentages, the background. It mentions Weber's name once, maybe twice, without ever precisely defining status group. The topper's answer, the one that scores 18 or 19 out of 20, does something completely different. It opens with a structural claim, not a definition, something like modern growth has not produced a post caste society. It names Weber's class status distinction with textual precision. It uses the Telangana survey in exactly one or two sentences as evidence, not as the subject of the essay. It brings in a counter thinker, here that is Karl Marx, reminding us that status is not free floating. It rests on material control over land and productive assets. And it closes with a forward looking synthesis about caste sensitive affirmative action. Remember this refrain, because I will repeat it every single day. The current event is your evidence, the theory is your destination. Here is a probable question building directly on this story. Using recent caste survey data from an Indian state as illustration, critically examine Weber's distinction between class and status group as a framework for understanding stratification in contemporary India. Notice the verb, critically examine. It wants exposition and evaluation, not a summary. Our second story moves us to paper 2, Systems of Kinship in India, specifically family and marriage in India, and the household dimensions of the family. The Supreme Court recently struck down a state welfare rule that excluded married daughters from the legal definition of family. The court said plainly that marital status bears no rational nexus to dependency or financial need, and that a married daughter cannot be presumed to have severed ties with her parental home. This sounds like a small administrative correction, but sociologically, it is much bigger than that. The concept you must anchor the story on is Leela Dube's idea of seed and earth. Dube showed how the dominant patrilineal idiom across much of India figures the woman as seed and the husband's lineage as earth, meaning marriage is imagined as a complete transplantation. The daughter belongs fully and finally to her husband's family, from the day of her wedding, with no continuing claim on her natal home. Now watch what the Supreme Court just did. It ruled that marriage does not sever a daughter's dependency ties to her natal family. That is a direct judicial contradiction of the seed and earth premise. The court is effectively saying the sociological fiction that a married daughter has left her birth family behind is not good enough reason to deny her a welfare benefit. Here is your second move, a Western thinker who pairs beautifully with Dube. David Morgan argued that family should not be treated as a fixed structural box you either belong to or do not. Instead, family is best understood as a set of practices, ongoing acts of care, obligation, and exchange that people actually perform. Look at how the Supreme Court reasoned. It did not ask, is this daughter formally unmarried, as the old rule demanded? It asked, is she actually dependent? Is she actually caring for her family? That is a functional test, a practice-based test, exactly what Morgan's framework would predict a modern family law should look like. Here is your quotable line for Dube. Write this down. As Leela Dube argued in Seed and Earth, patrilineal kinship idiom figures women as seed, transplanted into the husband's lineage, symbolically erasing continuing belonging to the natal family. If you can drop that sentence into a 10-mark short note with the case reference attached, you are answering exactly at the level this paper rewards. Let us do the examiner contrast again for this story. A 14 out of 20 answer treats this purely as legal news. It explains the facts of the case, quotes the judge, and stops there, with maybe a passing reference to women's rights. An 18 or 19 out of 20 answer does three things differently. First, it names the specific kinship ideology being disturbed, not generic patriarchy, but Dube's seed and earth framework by name. Second, It uses the judgment in one or two sentences only as evidence, then pivots immediately into theory, bringing in Morgan's practice-based family alongside Dube and even Uma Chakravarti's idea of Brahmanical patriarchy to explain why the exclusionary rule existed in the first place. Third, it closes by locating the ruling within a wider trend: compassionate appointments, succession, pensions, showing the examiner you understand this is one instance of a bigger jurisprudential pattern, not an isolated news item. The current event is your evidence. The theory is your destination. Say that to yourself every time you sit down to write. Here is your probable question for this story. In the light of the Supreme Court's ruling extending the definition of family to married daughters, critically examine the continuing relevance of Leela Dube's Seed and Earth framework for understanding Patriliny in India. Again, critically examine, so you must evaluate, not just narrate. Let us tie today together in 5 points. 1. Weber's class and status group can move apart, and Telangana's caste survey proves it. 2. Dipankar Gupta's discrete category reading of caste beats Dumont's purity ladder when you look at where the inequality actually sits, between groups, not within them. 3. Leela Dube's Seed and Earth names the patrilineal fiction that the Supreme Court has just started to dismantle. 4. David Morgan's Family Practices gives you the Western partner concept. Family as something people do, not a box they occupy. And 5. In every single answer, keep the current event to 1 or 2 sentences of evidence, and spend the rest of your words on theory. That discipline alone will move you from the 14-mark range into the 18 or 19-mark range. That is today's brief. I know this preparation is long, and some days it drains more than it gives back. But the candidates who eventually wear the tag do not have a secret formula. They simply showed up for one more day than everyone else who quit. So, show up again tomorrow. If you would like the complete answer blocks, the model answers, and the flashcards behind everything we discussed today, drop your email in the comments or write to the team at teamupscdesk.com and they will share the subscription details with you. Until next time, keep syncing your current affairs with your theory, and I will see you in the next issue.